All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to PAB board meeting for this Thursday, June 16th. I'm Larry Knox, the new chair. So our agenda tonight, actually, before we go into the drawer, if you can just say just a few words for just so people can get full use of our interpreters.
Okay, yes, so just a reminder that to make sure our interpreters can keep up, that this is a reminder to myself, that we speak slowly enough so that they can make sure they're hearing everything we're saying, and that we speak one at a time so they don't have to try to interpret overlapping voices.
Thanks. So we'll do introductions. I'm Larry Knox, the chair of, newly elected chair of the Police Accountability Board. And I'll just go on the screen if people can say their names. Dr. Harrison, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Bob Harrison. I'm a retired academic physician.
Rabbi Settle.
Aurora Settle, and I represent the Northwest Council seat on the PAB.
Mr. Bosco.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dwayne Bosco, the acting manager and chief of investigations at PAB.
Mr. Nikoloff.
Reverend Matthew Martin Nikoloff, represent City Council South.
Ms. Brown.
Good evening. I'm Arlene Brown, and I am the representative appointed by the PAB Alliance. I'm a retired postal employee, and I currently work part-time for a Metropolitan Funeral Home. And no, I don't deal with the dearly departed, just the families.
Mr. Higgins.
I'm Mike Higgins. I'm the chief of policy and oversight.
Ms. Pacheco.
I'm Marina Pacheco Walker, chief aide and executive assistant to the board.
Dr. Harvey.
I'm Ricky Harvey. I represent the mayor's appointee. I'm pastor of the Mount Olivet Baptist Church and glad to serve this board, and welcome and glad that you're here watching us live.
Thank you, everybody. Before we get into the staff reports, I do want to give a thank you and appreciation to our former board chair, Shawnee Wilson. She put in a lot of good work for a lot of years to help make this happen, and was for the last 2 years worked tirelessly every day to get to the success of this board. And I just want to thank her for her time. I know she's still going to be out there encouraging us, and I just want to really put a thank you in the Shawnee for the time that she put in, making sure we keep working and that vision that all of us on this board, including Shawnee, want, which is the doors opening and us getting to investigations and policy recommendations which is what the community asked us to do. So I just want to say that, and now start off with staff reports. Mr. Bosco.
Yes. So encouraging, great news that we are still on pace and scheduled to open on June 20th to start taking complaints. It's a testament to the staff here at PAB that sought innovative ways in order to make this a possibility. I want to thank Deputy Chief of Operations Case Management, Melody Harkless, and all of the case managers, as well as everyone else in operations. We went through a brief demo yesterday that was very thorough and complete in regards to having the intermediate system up in order to take on complaints and to house those complaints and to provide notifications for myself as well as our Chief of Policy and Oversight, Michael Higgins, who's on this meeting with us today. In addition to that, we met with the police chief as well as as well as DA Dorley and President Melendez, who serves as a mediator for the group, in addition to corporate counsel, city council. And it was a very productive meeting. We came away with that meeting with several promises, as well as a contact person to continue to move forward with. Out of those meetings came the agreement for ride-alongs. I've submitted the waivers to the PAB board as well as staff, and we're waiting on those signed waivers so that we can send them in and start with the ride-alongs. For those that haven't sent them in as of yet, please do so as early as possible so that we can get the ball rolling on that. They need a set number so that they can make necessary arrangements with the police officers. In addition to that, we were promised access to certain data bases as well as training that was offered to us. We are still awaiting the access to the data, and we are still awaiting access to the training that was put forth during that meeting. I've been in contact with with the individual that was put before us as a contact. We've gone back and forth. I have a listing of the data systems that RPD uses. However, we still have not been able to gain the necessary information in order to access those databases. Nonetheless, we are still moving forward with our open date, and the lines of communication remains open. That includes setting up another meeting with the chief and his staff, as well as President Melendez, to keep him abreast of the progress that we are making thus far. In addition to that, and I believe that is going to be covered under old business, but we need to vote on the rules for investigations. Sooner that we vote and approve those, we can provide a copy of those to RPD for their commentary, which should be within 30 days and send back to us. So that's something that is on the table for today as well. We also are moving forward with certain policies and human resources policies concerning everything from separation policies to performance evaluations. There is a discussion and work has been done regarding a work from home policy. However, the city is set to release their own work from home policy. So we will not be sending that to the board as of yet for review and confirmation, because once the city enacts their own, we would be basing our policy to make sure that it's in line with the city's policy. However, the other policies that have been worked on and reviewed, we will be sending those to you shortly as well for your approval. But the great news that, and Mike is going to touch on the policy and oversight portion of what's been worked on. But the good news is that despite hiccups, we're still moving forward, and we're still have that June 20th date where we will be opening our doors.
Thanks, Dwayne. And of course, opening our doors means calling and emailing also, which is, in COVID times, preferred way to do the reach out. But we can talk a little bit more later about just that detail. So thanks. Any questions for Dwayne before we move on to Michael?
I want to say thanks for all the hard work you're doing and keeping us on track.
It really is a testament to the staff. They've been unbelievable.
It's Arlene and then Reverend Harvey.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, especially since you are doing all of this under duress. But would you be kind enough to explain so that the general public will know what our ride along is all about?
So the ride along program is a program that RPD has in order to engage the public, and we're going to be utilizing it so that each of our staff members who selects to participate in the ride along program will get a firsthand view of what officers go through, the tasks that they've been asked to perform, and it gives us a better sense of what goes on in the field so that it helps our evaluations.
Thanks, Reverend Harvey.
Well, I would say thank you for the report. It's a very optimistic report, and happy about that. And in line with Board Member Brown's comments, I joined Board Member Matthew in agreeing to be one in the ride along as well. There is an old Indian prayer that says, "Grant that I will not criticize my neighbor until I have walked a mile in his moccasins." So it will be wonderful. I'm excited to have the opportunity, should that opportunity be available to us as board members. I'm excited to, if you will, walk in their moccasins, at least for one night.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks. Any other questions before we move on? All right. All right, Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about policy and oversight and make sure that we have open lines of communication and an established procedure for you, the board, to direct what we do at policy and oversight.
Wait, Michael, I'm sorry, before you go, can you just for the public, can you talk about just them getting, before you get to that, just part of the opening doors, it's not just taking complaints, but also policy recommendations from the public. So before we get to what we can do as a board, just can you tell about the public part of that process, us getting ideas from them or what they see? Sorry for interrupting.
No, absolutely. So on June 20th, when we begin accepting complaints and reports, we also accept complaints and reports about big picture issues with the police, what might be going wrong or right with the police that we can help evaluate. And when the public makes a complaint or report that touches on a big picture question, that comes to the Policy and Oversight Division, and we decide with your assistance from the board what to do, whether to make a proposal for change or whether to conduct an oversight investigation. And I do, if the board will permit me, I have a brief presentation that will do a little more explaining about the functions of policy and oversight, and then the places where the board can pull the levers to help us do our job. Okay, I'm just going to try and share my screen.
Sorry, I'm gonna make you a co-host so that you can go ahead and, oh, never mind.
I think it worked, so.
Perfect, never mind.
Okay, so I titled this How the Board Directs Policy and Oversight, because that's the big question that I have for y'all, is exactly how we're going to smooth out some of the ambiguities and make sure that you have the exact role that you want to have. So as I was saying, the Policy and Oversight Division has two main roles, two core functions. That's to develop proposals for change and to conduct oversight investigation. Proposals for change are a proposal to achieve a specific kind of change in Rochester's public safety system. That language comes from your bylaws. So that might be something like creating a proposal for change to make mass gatherings and protests safer for protesters and police. It's a process, it's an involved process that's laid out in your bylaws, and I'm going to go through how that works so that we can talk about where the board works and where the staff works and how we make those two things move smoothly. But it involves two drafts, basically one by staff, a second one after we receive community input, and then a vote by the board. We also do oversight investigations. That's an investigation that addresses a specific subject or aims to answer a particular question. An example might be evaluate RPD's response times for violent crimes for discriminatory impacts. And that process requires the policy and oversight team to develop an investigation plan, to give regular public updates, and to issue a final investigation report that you, the board, then votes on. This diagram is just designed to talk a little bit about how policy and oversight gets information about what we should be doing. And it can come from any one of many sources. So we might get a request from city council to do something. We might hear requests from you, the board, as a whole or individually. We might hear from the police department or the Locust Club. We might hear from our community affairs division, who's out in the community talking to people. They might hear things, problems, suggestions, and bring those back to us. We're going to, as I said, we'll receive them through reports and complaints. So you call us on the phone, you fill out a form on our website, we're going to get that information. The mayor might ask us to do something. And similarly, our investigations unit might see patterns in their individual investigations and say, hey, this sounds like something policy and oversight should look at. Maybe there's a bigger problem. This isn't just one specific problem. So we're going to be receiving and compiling all of that information all along. Then the question is, with our limited resources, which of these investigations, which of these proposals do we undertake? And that's a place where you, the board, comes in to help steer us. I want to talk a little bit about the process that's outlined in our bylaws right now to conduct either of these two things. So the first one is proposals for change. And so forgive this little complicated flow chart. This is not my best skill, but this is what I have. So in the bylaws, it says that a proposal for change can start by the board asking us to make a proposal for change. You could tell us, I want you to look at mass gatherings and protests, and you can send that request to us. Then it's our job as the staff to draft a proposal, make a first draft. After we make that first draft, the bylaws require that we post our draft for public comment. We're supposed to receive public comment from the community at large, from the PABA, from the RPD and the Locust Club. That's outlined in the bylaws. Those are the groups we need to ask for comment from. My team has been working on a process for our website to announce that we're soliciting public comment and to make it easy for people to give us that public comment. Once we get the public comment, we're supposed to take that public comment, address it, and revise our draft, make it better, incorporating what all of these different people or groups have told us. Then we take our revised draft and we bring it to you, the board, and you vote whether to approve, reject, or ask for changes. So you could say, I've read your report, I like it, but I want to change it, or I hate it, throw it away, or this is great, no changes. But that's your power. You tell us what to do at that point. Once you approve it, then we have the obligation to submit the final proposal to the RPD, the mayor, and the council. And that triggers the police chief's responsibility to respond to any recommendations that we make. They have 30 days to respond. So that's sort of the process. This process is very detailed and outlined in your bylaws. The real question is just, how does it start? So it can start with an ask from you. It could be, though, that policy and oversight sees things, the board staff sees things and has ideas about what they want to do, and they could send that up to you and say, this is what we'd like to do. What do you think? And you could then ask us. Or you could empower the executive director to just have us begin these things, and you have the oversight on the back end. But I'll talk more about that as we go forward. Okay. This is, there's a very similar process for oversight investigations, a little bit different, but again, the board can ask us to launch an investigation. Our responsibility as staff is to draft an investigative plan, basically what we're going to do and exactly what we're going to look at. Then we have to publish the plan, and we have to do that online. We have to email it to RPD, email it to the media, post it on our social media. After we do that, we're supposed to conduct the investigation. While we're conducting the investigation, we're supposed to give y'all regular updates and the public regular updates. Once we conclude, we draft an investigation report. After we draft our investigative report, we present it to you, and you can tell us, okay, let's publish this final investigative report. Or you could say, we would like to see more investigation. We think there are more questions to be answered. Please keep this case open. Please keep investigating. So those are the processes for the oversight investigation and the proposals for change that are outlined in your bylaws. The sort of questions that we have to ask ourselves that aren't perfectly defined is how you all will influence project selection, basically how we start the process. So it says in your bylaws that you can give us a formal ask. You have the power to ask us, that's the word that's in your bylaws, to do either one of these things. We, of course, are going to be in regular consultation with you. We are happy to meet with you in meetings like this or otherwise. To meet with a committee, you could empower a committee to have oversight over the Policy and Oversight Division. And of course, we're happy to meet and talk with any specific individual. We know you all have great wisdom and insight into policing in Rochester, so we want to hear your own individual ideas. We're required to give you regular board updates. Our internal rules that we've preliminarily drafted require us to give you an update at least monthly about when we decline to open an investigation from a complaint. And then every time we open a new investigation. You also, of course, have the power to supervise the executive director and acting manager and tell that individual how you want policy and oversight supervised and what priorities we should enact. I want to make clear, because I think there were some questions about it with our first draft of our protest policy analysis, that the board always has the final say. You always get to vote on the final process. So in oversight investigations, that means you vote on the final investigative report, and in proposals for change, you vote on the final proposal. Now, we haven't made a final proposal in our protest policies because we haven't presented to you for a vote and we haven't fully received community input. So we haven't done our revised draft and we haven't presented it to you to a vote. So I just want to be very clear that you, the board, always has the final say. There is always in your bylaws a vote to say, yes, this is the final recommendation. This is the final investigative report. You always retain that power no matter what, well, unless you amend your bylaws. I think what you could do tonight to help policy and oversight move forward is ask us to develop ask us formally, I suppose, to create the proposal for change again concerning protests and mass gatherings. Now, I think that our process did conform with the rules as written because we received information from the board and the acting manager at the time to do that analysis. And I think that that's consistent, but to formalize it, I think you could ask us to do that. You could also ask us to develop a proposal for change updating the EO 203 plan. We're ready to do that work and could very shortly publish that and then start soliciting input and then give you a revised draft.
Can you explain what that is for people who wouldn't know who are watching?
Sure. Yes, thanks. So a little over a year ago, this community got together to reimagine policing. There was a committee of people that included representatives from the PAB and other groups to think about how policing should be different in Rochester, and it created a list of over 100 recommendations. Well, we're about a year and some change, coming up on a year and a half past that initial plan. And so the question is sort of what progress has been made, what progress remains to be made, how does the progress that's happened so far compare with the initial recommendations? So we'd like to do an analysis like that, publish it, receive comment, revise it, present it to you for a draft. And then the last thing, yes, Rabbi Settle.
I'll wait until you're finished. I thought you had finished.
Oh, okay. The last thing I would like to do is maybe have some discussion and or confirm our procedure for how you want to make these asks and how much and how often you want to hear from me about what I think policy and oversight should be doing.
Okay. So now I'll say this. So while you're sort of discussing the issue, are we done with the PowerPoint? Can we go back to
Yeah, I can stop sharing.
seeing each other? Is that okay? Yeah. So while you're concerned about talking about the final process, my concern here is the initial process.
Mhm.
In other words, I think it's actually up to the board to talk about what you're going to look into to begin with.
Mhm.
So for example, I think the EO 203 process was deeply flawed. I don't think that they really took much of what the PAB had to say into account. I don't know that it's even worth looking into it because it really was not a very useful document and the whole process was not one that I think we had much confidence in. So even raising that issue and whether we should look into it should be a question for discussion, not the assumption that we're going to be doing it. And I guess what I would like to see is a consideration that, you know, of our capacity and understanding of how many investigations, reports, oversight things can be done in the course of a year. What are the potential topics for it? You know, what would the board like to see happening? What are you hearing from the community? And then the board prioritize them for you. And that is the way in which you go about doing it. To me, that's sort of what I think the board's role is supposed to be in this. Not sort of hearing at the end and approving it, but in fact determining at the outset what topics are to be looked into to begin with.
So maybe it makes sense to hear more comments from the board and then I can respond in whole because it's your all decision about how you want to manage the board staff. And so I want to know what everyone thinks and then maybe help you all decide among the relevant choices and ways you could do the things that, you know, for example, that Rabbi Settle is talking about.
I had a question. So for obviously the staff, I mean, your policy staffs, you already have ideas and thoughts that you're percolating as a board, as we talk and get ideas in or vote to have ideas put in. Do you have your own internal process for prioritizing or figuring out based off what you have seen that, you know, these are priority areas, these are things that we feel would have most impact? Obviously it'll be easier to answer as we get more information in over time. But beginning, how would you, if we're making recommendations, what metric are you using to kind of figure out and see which ones, in your opinion, are more higher priority than others or more within the guidelines of what we're supposed to be or can look at than others? I know some of that's in the charter. It goes in a lot of detail what we can look at, but just what metric are you using for prioritization?
Right. So for our own internal process, whether that's to decide whether to open or decide whether to propose to the board to open something, our draft process is basically that we consider a number of factors. One is the diversity of sources that we receive this information from. So if we're hearing it from our PD, we're hearing it from this part of the city, we're hearing it from community affairs, we're seeing it in investigations. So the diversity of sources that we see it from, the gravity of the potential harm or benefit from doing an investigation, like how much good or could we do, or bad could we avoid by conducting an investigation? So, looking at the totality of circumstances, but also we've delineated a couple different factors in an internal rule to decide. And then we have a little bit of our initial process is that any member of policy and oversight can propose one of these things by writing out a plan. And then it would come to me and I would decide to propose or not propose to you based on those factors and write down why I decided to do that or not do that. And I would present all of that to y'all. Again, that process can be our own internal process. And we can also just hear from you what you think we should be doing. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yep, that's Harrison. Yes.
Mr. Higgins, I enjoyed your presentation. And as you know, I like policy and procedures. And the main thing that I wanted to mention, and it's not in the way of criticism at all, is that the operating rules, I just finished reading them. I just got them a couple of hours ago, so I may not interpret them correctly, but in the operating rules, there's nothing about the board.
Nothing about the board?
There's nothing about the board.
Are you talking about the rules for investigations, you mean?
All of the decisions, the way it's stated in the operating rules is different from from your presentation.
Right. So the process I presented comes from your operating rules, the board's operating rules. And I think you can very much conform those investigative rules with I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, if we're going to apparently vote later on approving these operating rules.
Well, it's two different. Well, I think it's two different. There's our charter, and then there's also the rules for investigation, which we're going to be looking at different. Mike, you're referring to a different document when you say operating rules. You're thinking of something different than the rules, right?
I'm talking about the document that we got this afternoon.
Okay, well, that's rules for investigation. Well, we had that earlier too. I was just resending it out, but yeah, the rules for investigation are a little bit different than.
Well, they're not a little bit different. They're very much different.
Okay, well, that's a discussion we can have then. But yeah, just so people watching know, we're talking about our charter is different than the rules for investigations. That's just two different
documents. I agree.
So, Dr. Bob, if I could respond, I think there is a way to make those two documents and the two processes that I just described live together as one. So your rules, the operating rules, set out the procedure that my PowerPoint is basically based on. And nothing in the rules for investigation can diminish your powers. So you retain the formal power to ask us to conduct oversight investigations and ask us to to develop a proposal for change.
But I'm saying that you and the executive director are specifically named in that document as the decision makers and not the board.
So I agree that the rules for investigation authorize the executive director, also authorize the executive director and I to decide to open an oversight investigation or to develop a proposal for change. You could decide that you don't want us to have that power. I recommend that you retain the dual path wherein you have the power to tell us to do it and the executive director has the power to make that decision. And here's why I recommend that you have both paths. Basically, it's time and resources. So if something really bad happens in Rochester and we want to respond to it very quickly, if the executive director is empowered to open an oversight investigation, they can do that. We don't have to necessarily convene or have public discussion. The executive director, whoever they may be, could allow that process to go forward. You still retain the power to supervise the executive director and direct the executive director. So you still have that power over the executive director, and your operating rules give you the independent power, basically, to tell us to open oversight investigations or policy proposals. You know, the other part is that it is like the volume of work, right? We're going to receive lots of calls to do things and have to respond to them. And so do you want to be the board fielding each one of those calls and deciding yes or no, I want to open this oversight investigation, yes or no, I want to open this policy proposal on each individual basis?
It's
Or do you want
It's
to-
one of the 5 pillars.
I'm sorry?
It's one of the 5 pillars. The PAB is based on 5 pillars. That's sort of the catechism.
Mhm.
And policies and procedures. That's one of them.
Mhm.
It's Mr. Higgins, we're okay.
Okay, I mean, I'm not pushing back at all,
We're
Dr.
basically
Harrison.
on the same thing. And I'm sorry I've taken too much time.
Dwayne, then Dr. then Rabbi Settle.
So the question remains as far as the authorizations to look into, and this is only dealing with, the question is only dealing with the policy and oversight portion of this conversation regarding an initial investigation into policies and oversight practices and what may or may not come of that. So regarding the power to initiate any type of investigation concerning policies and oversight, the board has that determination. At any point in time, they can always delegate that responsibility, with the caveat that the ED will report back to the board during the very next meeting or the very next special session in regards to any type of opening up of investigations for policies and oversight. That will serve one of 2 purposes. One, it still provides you with the ultimate authority whether to halt or to begin an investigation as information becomes fit, as information is presented to you, whether that's during our normal board meetings or during any type of committee, subcommittee meetings that we will have with the board. But also it allows for, if we are seeing a certain patterns that come up, it's not always going to be a suggestion from the community. It's not always going to be a actual policy change that is initiated by RPD. There may be instances, and this is why needing that ability is when we spot different practices that are coming up as far as being, for instance, and I hate to provide an example, but if we're seeing a policy in regards to uncooperation with questioning officers and not showing up, and it's not a policy provision that was put out by RPD, but nonetheless, it's more than one instance, and it's encompassing a policy that needs to be addressed by PAB. In certain situations like that, instead of waiting for the next board meeting, we would be able to authorize the initial stages of it, with the caveat that it be reported to the board or any subcommittee at the next available hearing, at the next available session.
Okay, Rabbi Settle.
I haven't heard any example that convinces me that there's a necessity of urgency in any of those things about why things have to be done before the board can discuss it. And I certainly think that if there's any, really, or like if anything like Daniel Prude happens again, trust me, the board will be meeting immediately anyway. I guess what concerns me more, again, has to do with this idea like that we're going to be opening one investigation after another. And my understanding of our capacity is such that we're going to have really limited ability to do like, in other words, we're talking about a couple a year. So if they're only a couple a year, I really want to be sure that we're setting our priorities together. And with the full participation of the board. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's, it's not like we're going to have 40 investigations and we can just do all of them. We're going to have a handful of investigations, and that's why it's really important that we do it with all due deliberation and consideration in partnership.
You're talking about policy investigations, just for clarity.
Excuse me?
You're talking about policy investigations.
Correct. I'm talking about policy and oversight investigations. That's right.
Reverend Harvey, and Matthew after that, Matthew Nikoloff after that.
You're muted, Dr. Harvey.
So I think I heard you say that the board would investigate according to our discretion and not all of the cases that come. Did I hear anything like that? The board
So that's true only for policy and oversight, policy proposals for change and oversight investigations.
Okay.
It's not true with respect to allegations that involve individual instances of misconduct. So Rabbi Settle is correct that we cannot conduct every imaginable oversight investigation or examine every imaginable proposal. And so we do have to exercise our discretion, and we do want the board to decide those things. Our KPIs say that we should do 6 oversight investigations and 6 policy proposals per year. I think we will exceed that despite being significantly understaffed in the policy and oversight division. The question, I suppose, is like the scope of all of these things. And for example, the thing we wrote about protests and mass gatherings, that was about a 2-week project. There are projects that will take 2 years. There are projects that will take 6 months. There are projects that will take 1 month. And as our staff grows, our capacity will grow and there will be more to decide. I'm not opposed to the board making all of the decisions. I do think that if that's going to be the case, I would recommend that at a minimum you establish, more regular meetings than this, right? Because my staff needs to be able to respond to things that are changing on the ground, right? And so right now we don't have a procedure to do all these things. And so it slows me down a little bit.
So my follow-up would be, is there a suggestion that we investigate certain cases, such as the case, the Daniel Prude case, the cases that are politically inclined? I'm just asking.
No, I don't think so. In policy and oversight, so an oversight investigation wouldn't ask what went wrong with Daniel Prude. We wouldn't ask that question or seek to answer it. I think what we would ask we would ask pieces about the things that happened there and look for patterns, right? So, should spit hoods be used? What are the risks of spit hoods? How should the training be around those things? What should a ban look like with respect to those things? That's where we're exercising discretion. If we get a call that someone had a complaint that someone has been killed by the police, Dwayne's team, the investigations team, is going to investigate that. We're not going to exercise discretion on that. What we're going to exercise discretion on is what my team does. What you are going to exercise discretion on is what my team does, which is something different, related, but different.
Matthew.
Thanks. First of all, Michael, thank you for putting that presentation together. I learned a lot and it's really helpful to see visuals, so I appreciate that a lot. And thanks for all the hard work that y'all are doing. One suggestion I might put forward is it possible to just delay implementing the executive director's power as you're suggesting to see how things go at first and see how things look on the ground and to see if that becomes a need then to revote on it later. I partly ask because I think it makes sense as you say it, and I can also see the side that Rabbi Drora and others are raising as well. And I'm also concerned, given the council's emphasis on accountability and also just what we've all been through in the last month and a half, that whoever the full-time executive director ends up being after all this, that we continue to make sure that there's oversight and accountability from the board in different areas to make sure that we can regain some public trust around those things as well. So I would say if it's possible to put that off, look at it in another 3 to 6 months, see how things are going. And in the meantime, making sure that we are giving you the direction, because I hear you very clearly asking for some direction and some leadership from the board to help y'all get to work. And I appreciate how much y'all want to get to work and that you're eager to do that work. So it sounds like we can do some of that for you. And in the meantime, table that discussion and see how things develop on the ground once we start hearing cases and everything else. Also to see what whoever right now, Dwayne, and then whoever the ED will be at the point at which we're able to name that. So that would be a suggestion I'd put forth. I think it could be a both and, but maybe an already not yet kind of thing as well. And just start with the board and maybe a committee providing some more of that direct dialogue with y'all so that way you feel like your voice can be heard more expediently, and then re-examine the question of whether the executive director should also share in that power once things are more established on the ground. So I don't know what you think about that or others think about that, but that's one thing that comes to mind listening to you, wanting to honor your desire to work and your desire to do great work for us, and also wanting to make sure that we're proceeding more gradually and making sure that we're not taking off more than we can chew.
Yeah, I mean, how it's structured is a decision for this body, right, to determine. So if that's how you want to proceed, we are happy to, and I think I would ask our Associate General Counsel, AJ Derwin, to amend whatever needs to be amended to effectuate that process or whatever process you determined you'd like to see. And we can do that for you, and then you can implement it.
I had another one, but I don't, Arlene, did you have any questions? I know you haven't. Okay. I guess the one thing that stuck out to me was just, what is the procedure for communication? Like you said, you're seeing a bunch of cases a day. As a board, we're a little bit more removed from that, but all this is something that brought policy, recommendations and it's something that we're all very interested in. So do you think, is there like some kind of medium between, if there's like a weekly, a weekly report of, once we start getting enough numbers, of here's what we've seen this past week, and here's some ideas that, like, if we get a heads up that this may be coming, might be easier for the board and you and to kind of see, okay, this is what we see coming in because it's Friday and we're looking at this number of complaints and this policy issue seems to come up a lot of times, and that might be us both getting to that at the same point. And then maybe, I don't know if that's a subcommittee of the board or the whole board gets that, then we all kind of talk about it on a weekly basis, or I don't know, but is there a way to kind of share some information, not detailed obviously because of if someone might be confidential, but just of ideas of you seeing stuff in your internally within the policy office where at the end of the week we could start seeing things, and that might help us both make that decision together, or we as a board can make that recommendation because we're both seeing a similar thing.
I think Rabbi Settle, you have a thought about that?
Please answer that, and then I have another question.
Oh, I mean, I'm happy to prepare weekly reports about, what things we're seeing and provide it to you to make determinations about.
Even if that report also had some recommendations in it, that way it's like your recommendation, but also we're getting the same information at the same time. So we're both on the same page with, I doubt there's gonna be 40 different things for us to choose from. I hope not. Maybe we are to that point at some point. But if there's like something that's kind of popping up that we're both seeing, and you're giving us some context to that because your staff has more of that, maybe that could be an ongoing process of us, having that dialogue, or subcommittee of the board, if there's a few people more interested to be a part of that process. So it could be quicker too, because I don't necessarily want to wait for 9, responses all the time if it's timely. and we don't want to call a board meeting, but I think that'd be helpful, for some of the concerns people have about, having the decision making generate from the board and then with input as opposed to the other way around. But all right, Rabbi Settle, then Dr. Harvey.
I'm sorry to prolong this whole discussion, but I'm very concerned about what seems to be the very reactive nature of how we're going about this. In other words, we already know that we need to examine, interaction when there are issues related to mental health. We already know that there are some real issues around response to domestic violence. We already know that there are issues around interaction with minors. there are all these areas in which I think we know that we want to be looking at these policies. We want to be looking, we want to do, so for instance, one area that came up this week in the conversation I had, has to do with veterans and PTSD, veterans who go into police force and PTSD. Okay, we already know, there are all these areas, I think, in which we already know that there's a tremendous need for policy review and oversight, research. I don't think we have to wait to hear additional, at least in certain areas. So to me, it shouldn't be necessarily a reactive process. I think that there are already topics that we know, are crucial to how our community is being impacted by policing, and the police are being impacted by their experience of policing, that we can already be asking about. So I guess I want to, to me, I feel like we're already ready to talk. Like, if you're telling us that we're going to have 12, we can start with 12 topics this year, if you will, 6 for, 6 in one area and six related to policy and 6 related to oversight. I can see you could easily get 3 of each to begin with. I don't think we have to wait to hear anything, right? So I'd like to find a way to begin that conversation. I don't think we have to, I don't think it has to be something that we have to keep meeting to decide. I think we can have some conversation around it already. And I was just laughing when you say you have to meet more. I don't know any city board that meets every week the way we do, and often more. So, well, maybe we do need to sort of have a committee or something to do some additional meeting during the week. But maybe we can figure out a way so that the next board meeting we are able to start having some conversations, structure conversations, so we can start making some of these decisions. But as I said, I would like to see us be a little more kind of proactive, because I think that we all have an awareness that we already know a bunch of the things that need to be looked into and that have already, existed as issues in our community for a long time.
I agree, and we're ready to go. And to the point about, I hope there's not 40 on the list. Right now our list has about 35. So, and I'm hearing more tonight. So, I do think we need to have a process, right? And it should start as soon as possible so that we can do the projects, the proposals you want us to do, and the oversight investigations you want us to do.
Thanks. Dr. Harvey, Dwayne, and then Dr. Harrison. And if there's nothing else, I'd like to close out after that so we can move on. But Dwayne.
So I certainly don't want to belabor the point, but I want to be clear. And I think the public that's listening to us wants to be clear as well. I'm getting text messages as we are meeting. And the question is, we're opening, and I'm hoping this is totally related to where we are. We're opening June 20th to finish that for me.
Start accepting complaints.
To start accepting complaints. So that means what to the public, and how does the public, or how will the public, or when and how will the public get the word that we open June 20th to hear complaints?
Great question. Great question. Our public affairs.
Before, wait, Dr. Harvey, I do want to, because when I go to the chair's report, I am going to talk more about the opening. So I do want to finish up the policy conversation, which is, and also we're opening up to get policy recommendations too.
Okay.
I do want to finish the policy recommendation before we dig into more detail in the opening.
Okay.
if you just hold it, then we'll come back right to start with that.
Sure.
Dr. Harrison?
I'm trying to make sure that that you understand what I'm talking about. I'm at the document PAB investigation that Larry sent around earlier today. And I'm on the paragraph under policies and procedures that says closing an oversight investigation. And it can be closed upon recommendation of the chief of policy and oversight and the approval of the executive director.
Dr. Harrison, can you say what page you're on?
It's 35 or 40.
Okay.
I don't know what page, Larry.
It's page 35 or 40.
35.
35.
Thanks, Dwayne. Yep, go ahead, Dr. Harrison.
PAB will provide notice of the investigation closure to the RPD chief, the mayor, and the city council. Nowhere in that paragraph does the board mention. That's the only point I'm getting at, is that this document, this section on policy and oversight is askew from what you just finished describing to us, Mr. Higgins. And we know that the written text will last longer than what you say.
I hear you, Dr. Harrison. I don't think they actually directly conflict, because your bylaws give you the power to issue the final investigatory report. So
yeah, I understood that point.
But I also want to say that I hear you, that you want this manual changed. And what I'm saying to you about that is, we can do that consistent with your direction. And I think it would be beneficial for our process for you to approve it tonight while saying that you want these specific changes. But perhaps Mr. Bosco has a different thought about that.
No.
Thanks, Mr. Higgins.
What I was going to get to is just a simple wording that we can approve the rules with the amendments for pages. It's not just 35, it's page 34. Page 34, subsections 2A, that calls for 2A, subsection 3, that calls for the executive director to determine. We could pass it with an amendment to that section that will change the language from the executive director to the board. And likewise, on page 35, we could pass it with an amendment that the board will have final decision in order to close out any type of oversight. And with those two amendments, since that's the only portion of the documents that deal with it and were concerning in regards to the appropriate power line exclusively with the board, then we can pass it with those amendments.
All right, thanks. I think when we get to that part of the agenda for old business, we can work through those amendments. But Dr. Harrison, even just, wherever it says PAB by itself or executive director, just replacing that with at the board's direction or the board, we should go through that when we get to that part. But there seems to be agreement that that's something that we all want to do. And I will say for the policy recommendations, I do, if people want to email me after this, we could talk afterwards or later. I think it would be good to have like a subcommittee that deals with the policy work, so we could kind of be quick in engaging them on that and getting recommendations. Everybody, of course, can do their own recommendations for policy or oversight, but figuring out what that big list is that we all agree on at the beginning. I know Rabbi Settle's going to want to sit on that, and whoever we hear from the community also getting the input in. But if Mikey, if you have a list of 35 already, and all of us have things in our head already, if there's some things outside, the crowd one's an obvious one, so I'm glad that got started. But if there's a few other big ones that we have some agreement on, that should just get started to fill up some of those KPIs, and then other stuff may come up that we see. I do want to get that going, sooner than better. And does that have to be a full board thing? So we have to wait till a full board meeting, but just us communicating that to you, with the sense of the board, and then the board, maybe affirming that, at the following meeting after we've started on it already. I think might be a way to do that. All right. Any last thoughts before we move on? hopefully the answer is no, but I gotta say it just to give you the option.
I just want to say again that, oh,
I was just going to
Ju-
say,
yeah.
I'll hear you, Reverend, but after my portion, if you all will allow me to go, I am solo parenting right now. So that'd be great.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I just want to highlight to the public and to the board that this is a great conversation to be having. We have staff who are eager to get to work and who really want to do good work for us. And this is how we're going to get it done to make sure we honor the public's and the staff's valuable time and resources. So I love having conversations where we're trying to say how we're going to get the most work done and do it well. So thanks, Dwayne and Mike, for bringing so much good stuff to the meeting. Yeah, it's great. We have great staff and you guys are exemplary of that. So thank you.
Yep, thanks. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
All right. Next on the agenda is our chair's report, or my chair's report, the chair's report. At first, I want to talk about just next week we're opening for the public, and I'm really excited about this. This is something years in the opening, years coming. Obviously, there's a lot of work going on, as everybody can hear and see, but for us actually being in a position to officially start taking in complaints and policy recommendations and continuing the community outreach that we've already started. I know we're going to have a booth at Juneteenth, the big Juneteenth festival this Saturday, so please stop by there if you plan on attending that. And we're going to be doing other community events also, but the main thing is those doors opening tomorrow. That's got to be what our priority is going forward as a board next week, making sure that goes smoothly, which is the work that's happened. You know, despite everything else that's been going on, the staff has been working very hard. The board has been working very hard and making sure that desire of the community and our allies and city council and the mayor's office is being met. And that's happening next week on Monday. So I'm just really happy to hear that. The process is not going to be 100% perfect because when you ever open up something this big, there's going to be, you know, something that might go out wrong or off a little bit, but our staff has really taken every consideration, every thought in addressing those in advance. So something does sneak through, it wouldn't be from a lack of effort of addressing it in advance. But I do want people to realize, you know, starting next week, they can go to, you know, going to our website and calling our number, you know, go to the website, it's all there. You know, you can, and going online and be able to do it online or calling or, you know, the other ways that we have of you putting in a complaint or policy recommendation or reaching out to us. And at community events, it's happening. It's starting next week. If you want us to come to your, you know, if you have a fair on your street, if you have, you know, anything bigger than a multifamily garage sale, reach out to us and we'll try to get, you know, some of our outreach staff or other staff there to talk about what we're doing. If you want materials, we've put together materials. We're gonna put them all, you know, we're in the process of working to get them out in the libraries and other city buildings. But if you have a community center or a church or any kind of facility where you like information on the police accountability board and how people can go through this process of doing complaints and policy recommendations, please reach out through us, you know, to us through email or call, and we'll make sure that we get that to you. We have information that is for you, is for the community, is for your parishioners, is for your, you know, your congregation, is for your community that you're engaged with, is for your street, is for your block club, it's for everything. You know, the community center that you volunteer at. We want to get that information out, and we're going to have radio ads. There'll be other ways that you'll see and hear it, but the best thing is hearing it from somebody in person. If you're one of the few people watching this right now or sharing it, eventually, you know that this is something that you want it to happen, and we're on the cusp of starting that. You know, that dialogue is now becoming reality, but we want to help. We need your help to get the word out so people know how the process works. And we have a lot of, and Dwayne and the rest of the staff done a real good job of training everybody who's coming in that is working for you at the PAB to be able to explain that process out in the community. And when you call, answering your questions, because this is something unique. It's not what the past was in regards to complaints. This is a totally much more detailed and powerful process for you as resident of the city or the community. So please just take advantage of that when the doors open next week, you know, more figuratively than literally maybe, but we will have a process. We want you to take advantage of it. And please reach out so we can share that information in ways that you feel is most helpful, especially if you're somebody who was in the fight literally and figuratively for this. Also, I do want to, you know, announce, and I'm sure many people saw some good news about our budget. There was a lot of concern about the budget. And I do want to say we got fully funded. You know, the $5 million is good for the rest of the year, the fiscal year. That wouldn't have happened because if anybody who watched the budget hearing a couple weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, there were a lot of tough questions that Dwayne and other staff took about this because our council members were very concerned. And you know, they gave answers then. They gave good answers then. A lot of our board members, majority of our board, you know, got engaged with the community and other council members to help explain and express hear their concerns and help get us to where we are. And also the staff did a real good job. And this isn't something that, you know, answering questions afterwards that the council asked. So us getting to that vote was a lot of work done by the staff and by the board to make sure the council members, you know, had their concerns addressed. We gave a lot of detail in those answers. They had the expectation that we put out at that meeting that we would be opening the doors on the 20th, and we are doing that. And the staff put a lot of work into that. But I do want to say I'm really happy that we are fully funded, and we're going to have conversations with council about the metrics they're looking for to make sure that that funding continues all throughout the year. But that's a conversation, you know, we're going to be having going forward all throughout. You know, we're going to make sure we have much better communication with council. And as we move forward as an independent organization, but working, you know, with our allies from the Alliance in the community and city council. So I'm just really happy that we do have the $5 million in funding. And as we move to do this work, bring more people in to get trained and become a part of our staff, and also to hear from the community. We need you to speak up, and we want to hear your voice. And that's what we'll be doing starting next week. Any questions before I move on to committee reports? Arlene, at some point before we end, I'm gonna need an inspirational speech for the community, because I am not what you are with that. So that was me at my you know, at my high point right there almost. But I'm really excited because this is something. I mean, I'm excited that we're at this point. A lot of hard work went into this. Any committee reports before we get to old business? Okay, old business, our vote on the aforementioned investigative rules. We do have, everybody should have that. It's been emailed a couple of times. You know, our latest one I emailed out this morning, and obviously Dr. Harrison had some good suggestions that we just discussed for potential amendments. But we do need to approve these, you know, with amendments and an opportunity to amend later, just so we can have this in place and accessible for the RPD to have their thoughts in, and for our staff to know that, you know, we're fully functioning with these and with these voted on. So I guess before we get to the sections that Dr. Harrison talked about, is there any other sections people had concerns about or thoughts about? Dr. Harrison's session was towards the later part of the document. So is there anything earlier in the document that people want to bring up? Dr. Harrison.
I'm sorry. I did notice earlier in the document, Mr. Pasco, that claimants would be identified by a picture ID or social security number. And
I'm sorry, do you know what page that was on? Just so we can.
Oh, come on, Larry.
Do you remember what section it was?
I have trouble remembering where I am. I don't remember. And I'm not asking that it be changed as much as I'm just asking that you think about that. Most people are going to look askance at providing a social security number. That would just be my concern.
I do see on page 10, I'm sorry, section 3, on page, section 3, page 10, under formal and informal statements, there is a section D. I'll read it. PAB will attempt to verify the identity of anyone who provides a formal statement. In general, this verification can be done by asking for a picture of a government issued photo identification card and or a social security number. Is that the part that you're talking about, Dr. Harrison?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Dwayne, what are your thoughts on, are there any alternatives that people could use, or if especially somebody's maybe undocumented and doesn't have one of those things. How would we, what are thoughts of how we would address that?
I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't give you my social security number.
No, it's not providing that. It's providing different avenues in which you can actually identify yourself for the purposes of a formal statement. So we could change it by any government issued identification. We can amend it to mean that if there's issues in regards to migrant workers making a claim, or undocumented workers making a claim, if that's the concern, they have the ability to make an anonymous complaint. So this is for a formal complaint.
If they're undocumented, they probably wouldn't have a social security number anyway.
Also, Bob, the social security number is not required. It was
It's
given
an
as an
option.
example.
And it says and or, yeah. Dwayne, what would happen if, I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison, you have another follow-up to your question, if you, okay. So what would happen if somebody maybe, doesn't have social security number, doesn't have government ID, is undocumented, or maybe not, but they don't want to be anonymous. They want to still do a complaint and be known. What would we do then?
If they're not undocumented, they're not undocumented, or they might be undocumented, what you're stating.
Yeah.
And they still make a formal complaint with their name on there.
Yeah, they just want to use their name, but they don't have a social security number. They don't have ID because they just don't. But they don't want to be anonymous. They actually want to put their name on the complaint.
I don't know a way around properly identifying someone. If someone walks in off the street and says that this is my name, and they have no documentation whatsoever, no photo, no state or federal issue ID, any school ID, any even concealed to carry license, any type of license issued by the state. If they have none of those things, the only remaining possibility would be to do it based upon some type of I guess an electric bill, something in your name, but that runs the risk of someone filing a complaint under someone else's name. And that's why it's important, if they're making a formal complaint with their name on there, that they have some form in order to properly identify themselves. I know that, or even voter registration card, there are different ways around there in regards to having a manner in which to certify you are who you say you are. So that's why I was suggesting changing the language to any acceptable government identification, which would run the gambit between licenses, photo licenses, school IDs, voter registration cards. It would really run the gambit so that we can properly reference someone who they and identify that they are who they say they are if they're going to put their name to it. Outside of that, I'm not certain what the solution would be if someone is insisting on making a formal complaint using their name without any form of identification at all.
Thanks, Reverend Nikoloff, and then Dr. Harvey.
Yeah, actually, I'm thankful for Dr. Harrison's question, because I think another group that might be adversely affected by this are homeless persons and are folks who, they lose their ID, and it's expensive to replace IDs. Sometimes you don't have all the documents. And so at the very least, I would suggest, if it hasn't been done already, maybe it has, that there be some sort of resource list available for the intake agents that they could connect with, say, St. Joseph's Neighborhood Center or another place that assists where complainants could go to work on getting that ID. I think there's a lot of great agencies in town that do that for folks. And if we can expand it and maybe even consult with some of those places to see what they do when someone's looking for an ID, just so we can make sure, because I do think especially homeless folks, are people who might make complaints because they do have lots of encounters with law enforcement and other people, again, who just maybe haven't had an ID for a while because they haven't had the documents. But at least helping them take that step. And I don't think we can do all that stuff for them in the office, but helping them to know where they could go. I'm guessing that we'll have lots of complainants who come in with secondary issues, and having some resources to say, like, okay, you just went through this, but also you might need to talk to someone about like a domestic situation, as the rabbi said earlier, or something else. And again, that's not our job to be a resource referral, but having a couple sheets there that we could give them a quick referral might be helpful.
I'm glad you brought that up, Reverend Anthony, because that's part of our procedures. It's not outlined in specifically as far as the agent's listings in the rules, but that is something that we do, that we are prepared to do, and something that we've discussed. We've come up with a list of different agencies to suggest that they turn to, because we no matter what we do, we understand that PAB is only one facet of the legal realm or remedies that you can seek. So we want to make sure that they're utilizing everything at their disposal.
Thank you. I should have asked if you were doing it, not that you should do it, but I appreciate that a lot. Thanks.
I will say, I know, from hearing, and Dr. Harvey, I'm sorry, you're next, Dr. Harvey, then I'll go.
I would just say real quick, I agree with Board Member Harrison. I wouldn't want to give my social security number, and I'm clear on that being an option. I agree with Board Member Nikolov in that there should be some ways to maybe there should be some consideration for people who may not have ID. And then my question or my concern would be, are we assuring the public of what our level of confidentiality is? And how are we assuring the public of the level of confidentiality that we as PAB will have?
So when it comes to, and this is part of the issue and the delay that took us so long to open our doors, is making sure that we had a secure system that can house that type of information, the personal information. We do have that system in place right now where all the input and the data that is inputted into our interim system will be secure. Matter of fact, even once the IT sets up the system and they've set up the system, they are out of the system, so they can't go back in there and look at it and look at people's information. So that's what was utmost to us, is providing a secure method and a means in which people can provide their information and understand that it will be secure. The access to that database is limited as well. Not every worker at PAB has access to it. You're looking at the case managers who have access to it, and you're looking at the investigators who have access to it, as well as myself, the chief of policy and oversight, and the deputy chief of case management has access to that database. So it's a limited number of people have access to it. It's even more limited number of people that have the ability to change the information once it's inputted in there. So the system itself is secure.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I know from conversation I had earlier with in case management, the case managers, the people that are taking the initial intake, they will have, they have, like they give mentioned when, information to refer people to somewhere else, that may be come up as related to their case. I know even in our community, there's a whole, something that our MAPI has worked on, is the no wrong door theory, where somebody's going to get help and the place they go to get help doesn't have everything that is offering them, as opposed to sending them to 40 different other places or having that person not know where to go, that wherever they go is able to tell them, and here's the next 2 or 3 places that can help you with this issue and that issue. Obviously, like you said, we can't do everything here, but we should be able to have the resources to the information to direct people to where else they can get help from things that are related to that. And we, as a board, if you could share those lists with us as a board, because there might be things that we can add as a board, different organizations that we're all affiliated with or know about or lead, as some of us on there are, that some of the clergy are here, there might be things they can add in that aren't on that list. So I think that would be good.
I'll send that, the listing out to the board tomorrow.
So for actually, I do want to do all the amendments at once, but for potential amendment, I think here, it does say asking for a picture of a government issue photo and/or, so I guess there isn't really a need to amend that, right? We're just clear that it's or and not and for a social security number. And government issue photo identification is a pretty broad term, but just that we want to offer resources to help people who may not have that government issued ID when they come in, so it doesn't stop them from being able to do a complaint that's not anonymous. All right. I know, Dr. Harrison, you had something in sections 8, but before we get there, anybody have any other potential amendments before section 8? Okay, for section 8, about changing out where it says executive director or just PAB to, I don't know, do you want to use the words with board approval or in consultation with the board? What language are people thinking? And also on section 8, there is a part B underneath review section. This is on page 34.
I would like to make a general comment on that section.
Yes.
And that is that it lacks the clarity and board control that the investigation unit has. But they both should have equal weight. So for investigations, you have a system that says before you can cancel a complaint, a board committee has to approve of it. If you're going to pursue a complaint, the board committee has to approve of it. There's a lot of board input into investigations that's not written into the policies and procedures. Now, the way Mr. Higgins explained it sounds a lot better. I don't know why there's a difference between the written text and the spoken text.
Well, it was a draft, so I think it's, there won't be a difference once we change what we agree to change.
Well, I would be happy I would be in favor of approving the document with the understanding that further revisions would be in the offing.
Reverend Harvey?
It's 8 o'clock, so I want to know, what is it that you really need of us? What do you need of us at this point?
Ball game doesn't start till 9.
He wants to watch see the hearings. Well, for this, we just need to vote to pass this, but if we want to do amendments, we have to amend it first and then vote to pass. That would be because we have to pass this, so it's in motion, and that's something that could be shared. Although we might have amendments coming with the RPD, so they have time to review. They have is it 30 days? They have to get back. Yeah, it's a 30-day review process. We want to get that going for them.
I so move.
I second.
Okay, are there any amendments that people would want to propose, or is that something we're going to do at a later meeting? All right, I think as a board, we should work. Dr. Harrison, I know you had some stuff. Dwayne, you had some ideas for potential amendments. We should just get a conversation going, just getting those. So for the next board meeting, we can have an amended document, especially since we're gonna be sharing this with the RPD. I want to make sure they see it with the amendments, sooner than later. So, we can send them the draft, let them know there'll be some amendments coming, and then we can have those for the next meeting. Does everybody agree to work so we can get the amendments for the next meeting?
Well,
Yeah,
Sounds
but
good
there's
to
a
me.
motion on the floor.
Well, I was gonna start offering amendments, so I'm gonna, if we had an agreement to, I wasn't asking for a formal vote on that, on my idea. I just want to not propose amendments if we agree to do them next time. So if there's a general agreement that we'll do amendments next meeting, then I would just move the motion that we vote on this now.
Okay.
So general agreement, we'll do amendments next time for everybody.
I agree.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so do we need a second?
It's been second.
I second it.
All right. All in favor of passing the rules for investigation, this April 22nd draft? Aye.
Okay, I have Harvey, I have Settle, I have Brown, I have Harrison, I have Nikoloff, and I have Knox.
Okay.
Looks like the motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you for my first vote being unanimous. I appreciate that, everybody.
Nice.
So that is now passed. We'll do the amendments next in 2 weeks. On to the next item, new business. I have one item, just announcement. Oh, yes, Rabbi Settle.
Just under old business, a reminder that we have an in-person training next Thursday.
Yes.
Now that we've passed the investigations on investigations from our SNK partners, Mina Malik and Thomas Kim. And we are working on better Zoom hookups for those of you who for health or other reasons cannot be there in person. And that will be at PAB offices at 6:30 p.m. on Thursday.
Thanks. I do want to announce at our first July meeting, we'll be doing new board of elections. I just got elected chair, but that was through the rest of the term that Shawnee Wilson had, which ended at the end of this month. So we already had scheduled new elections for chair and vice chair, and those will be happening in July. So just stay tuned, but we will be doing elections for permanent chair and vice chair at our July meeting.
Thanks.
Any other new business before we adjourn? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right. I think it's unanimous. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Yeah, we got more than, all right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate, I'm really excited. Let's do the people's work. That's what we got picked to do by our community, and let's make that happen. All right. See everybody soon.
Good
Thank
night.
you.